And hello, everybody. Forgot to turn my microphone on. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Double Crossed Radio, coming to you live from sunny Southern Oregon. Beautiful day today. I am in great pain today. You know how every once in a while you sleep wrong get your neck kind of crinked up on your pillow or something. You wake up, you got a stiff neck. And yeah, I had one of those days 2 days ago, and I haven't been able to slow down enough to let it heal. And so between naps and a little trip my wife wanted me to take today, I didn't have a ton of time to go over all the different details I wanted to go over today for my topic. So if I just have stories without references and things that you can check on your own, cut me a little slack this week. If you need to have more information because you don't believe me, you can leave a message at our Facebook page, and I will find the reference that I'm recalling and talking about, and I will give you that information and let you look it up yourself, because I'm not here to lie to you. I'm here to try and tell you the things that I know as facts, and I rely on. In history, I rely on the words of the people who lived through it, and you can go back and research newspapers or read books by people who research newspapers of the day and such like that. But let me get down to kind of what prompted today's subject and just exactly what it is. By the way, for those of you who didn't get a chance to listen to our show last week featuring Mary Ruwart, make sure if you have some spare time this week to listen either on the podcast rebroadcast that's available at UCY. It's over there on the left-hand side of the page on the UCY Double Crossed Radio page, or on the YouTube channel. That was just a fabulous show. Mary Ruwart she's awesome. Thank you very much, Mary, for being on the show. It was very, very interesting for me. I hope we can have her back sometime soon, perhaps when she comes out with her second book. She is really a great guest, and she had a lot of interesting things to say. So don't just take my word for it, and you can go and listen yourself. So back to the show of tonight. Tonight I'm going to revisit that topic of who will build the roads, or who has built the roads more accurately. Not who's going to build the roads in the future, but who has built them up to date. And I'm going to give you a little background on why I decided to talk about this today. Excuse me a minute. I have to adjust myself in my chair because this is very uncomfortable. I'm not going to be able to do a whole hour sitting like this. Let's see if I can get a little further away from things without disrupting everything. Should have done this before we started the show. Okay. It's much better. I'm in a happy spot now. A couple of weeks ago, this had been probably about middle of September, and it was after some big rally that Bernie Sanders had. I was driving home from work, and the car that I use occasionally when I drive from work is our delivery van, and the guys that drive the delivery van, they like to listen to sports radio. It's I guess no matter how much I tell them how little importance that has to their life, that's what's interesting to them. So that's what they listen to. Anyway, I turn on the radio. I turn on the car, and the radio comes on, and this guy's talking about Bernie Sanders and his rally. I think, they're listening to something about politics. I didn't really look at the radio thing. Actually, the clock came up on the player, not what station it was. It wasn't anybody that I recognized. It was just some guy talking about Bernie Sanders, and then it started to get kind of humorous. He started to talk about Bernie Sanders like he was a professional football team or professional baseball team, and what he had to do to improve his chances to win in Iowa, to win in New Hampshire, and so it's like you gotta pick up this guy to do this, and you gotta get this endorsement, and and it's like you have to meet this trading deadline, or you have to get in someone to be your fourth place hitter, and you got to have a quarterback that can throw the ball downfield. It was the same stuff. He was just making it into politics, and it was actually quite funny. I thought for a second he was doing this on purpose as a parody, but he was serious. And I was holding back laughter. It was very funny. Maybe some of you heard this. It was a Fox Sports radio channel. I learned later. I don't know the name of the person's program that I was listening to, but let me tell you, it's whoever you are out there, if you're listening to this and you're the guy I was listening to, stick to sports. You're much better at sports than you are in politics. Anyway, then part way into this, or he's about just before I turned it off, he started to get kind of defensive, and I kind of hesitated. I said, "Oh, this is interesting." He's starting to become not just the Bernie Sanders, the Bernie Sanders analyst. He's now turning into a Bernie Sanders cheerleader on a sports show. So I said, this is kind of something I don't really respect from a sports show. But if a guy has a personal opinion, I mean, it's his right to say what he wants to. This is under Fox Sports News Radio. If they're okay with it, I guess I don't agree with him. I probably won't listen to him ever again. But I mean, he's welcome to say it. I wasn't offended by it. I did think that he does have a rather large audience. He's able to, and people that are maybe are easily led to the slaughter, and his comments may have done more harm than good. I think he was just trying to do something that would help people, but I think he was probably hurting them because he really doesn't know anything about what he was talking about. He should stick to sports, like I said. So as I said, he was feeling or sounding kind of defensive. He was, Bernie Sanders is the only socialist in our U.S. Congress. He's a socialist senator from Maine. He caucuses with the Democrats, which just because they have more in common with him than the Republicans. But he has about the same in common with the Democrats he does with the Republicans, because both political parties are really more socialist than they are free market. And I don't think that Bernie Sanders needed any defense about being a socialist. I think the defense should be, look, at least he admits to being the socialist instead of pretending like the Democrats and Republicans that are running for president. So that would have been an honest statement. I would have said, oh, gosh, this guy's pretty enlightened. But no, he started defending socialism. And this is why I had to pull over on the side of the road, because I was laughing so hard I thought I was going to have an accident. He started throwing out straw man after straw man to defend socialism as an economic system. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what straw man means, it's you throw out a statement that maybe someone made that you have an easy comeback to that just slaughters that statement and makes you seem to be the winner of the debate. So he was debating himself, and he was defending socialism, and his other part of himself was attacking it with really worthless statements that didn't seem to make any sense, and he was just taking them down one after another. And one of them had to do with the roads. Yeah, we're getting back to the topic as I announced it. And according to this guy, I wish I had a chance to get his name, because the guy should have to own these words he said. But he said we wouldn't have any roads in this country if it weren't for socialism. And then he said, and this isn't quite a quote, but it's as close as I can remember it, "Take that, you conservative knee-jerk market types." And it might have been more like, "Take that, you conservative knuckle-dragger free market types." I don't know, but it was something along those lines. He was kind of throwing in a pejorative along with stating what he thought was an obvious, that if it wasn't for socialism, we wouldn't have roads in this country. This was wrong on so many different fronts. I had trouble figuring out just where I'd begin my assault on this theory, but I just have this personality that just won't let something like this go. I have to at least for my own personal self, dismiss this as being, so far off base. It doesn't even, it shouldn't even rate as worthy of our time. But we have to spend time doing this. During the 1920s, John Maynard Keynes, he came out with his general theory, which was is now kind of the basis for all of the college economics that's taught. Friedrich Hayek had been a really severe critic of an earlier work of Keynes on money, monetary theory, and had destroyed his work so much that Keynes didn't even bother to try and defend his position. He says, "Oh, that doesn't matter. I'm onto something new now." And Hayek was so busy doing his other stuff, he didn't want to spend time to tear apart this general theory, which was just a bunch of nonsense. Or the only parts of it that were any good were stuff he'd stolen from other economists, and the new, I would say the new things that he had thought up were just, they're completely void of any common sense or any historical relevance. So they're, but because he didn't do that, we go into a worldwide depression, and many governments are wondering what to do. And here's this theory that says if you increase spending, you'll come out of a recession or depression faster because you're stimulating the economy. So a lot of governments said, this is great, we can grow the size. This is an excuse for us to grow our government, to grow our control over people, and that's kind of a politician's dream. So because of that, this worldwide depression lasted much longer than it should. There were a few countries where they realized this was just BS, the people that were in control realized it was BS, and they declined to do that, and they recovered rather quickly. I think Great Britain comes to mind as a country that did that. I think there were some others in Europe and around the world, different places that also had quicker recoveries because they relied on classical economics to find the solutions to the problem, and were soon back on the road to a healthy economy, whereas the Depression in the United States lasted 17 years. That's from 1929, say it again, to 1946. That's 17 years. And actually it's probably the last part of 1929 and most of 1947, to be technical, which was still about 17 years. Anyway, during that time there was a war. There was a lot of people's minds on other things, and no one had taken the time, since the time he had written general theory, to really properly take it down to where it really was and it really belonged. It's into the trash heap of history. Instead, a guy named Samuelson took the general theory and he kind of used it to form a textbook for college economics students. And it was his textbook based on the Keynes, it's hard to say, Keynes's theories, Keynesianism, that became the standard for college textbooks for economics. So anybody who was going into business or management or whatever, they took an economics course, the first book they got to read was General Theory, which was just a pile of bullshit. And yet, because this worked so well as I don't want to really say it's an apology for big government, but it rationalized growth of government so much by saying we need to stimulate the economy. And we're even using this same backwards language today. That, in a sense, from that point on, that would be sometime in the middle of our Great Depression. Let's just pick the date. Prior to 1932, so we'll give Herbert Hoover some of the blame as well, which he deserves. And from that point on, we were pretty much implementing the kind of the key concepts or precepts of socialism to try and recover from this economic disaster we had, the Great Depression. but we didn't ever recover. And people will tell you, oh yeah, there was a recovery and then another recession. No, that was just economic statistics, much like they're doing today, that were lying about the real status of what was going on, in order to try and have people think that things were better than they were. And then there was the war, and some people said the war brought us out of the Depression, and there's no way a war can ever bring a country out of a depression, because all the war is about is destroying wealth. And I don't know how you can ever call destruction of wealth a means to get out of a depression or a recession, but that's what that was part of the Keynesian theory. So that was what has always been touted as what got us out of the war. And yet, and you can go today, you can listen to, I mean, I don't advise this, because you'll probably have to get a lifetime subscription to Milk and Magnesia or something for upset stomachs. But you can listen to people like Limbaugh, Hannity, people who are these supposedly free market, right-wing, conservative talk show hosts, and they're supposed to believe in free markets, yet they think a war brought us out of the Great Depression, and they believe that. They really believe it. And they don't question it at all. And yet you ask them, so, well, what aspect of war provided this stimulus that would create this robust economy that we had after the war? And they can't really pinpoint it. They say, well, the unemployment went down. Well, the unemployment didn't really go down. A bunch of people got drafted into the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, whatever. We call that slavery, in other words. They were enslaved to go out and be shot at by other people, and they did that because those people were no longer looking for work. He said the unemployment rate went down. So that's a bunch of hooey. Then other people will say, well, our productivity increased. We were producing more and more goods all the time. But those goods never made it to the consumers. Those goods were sunk in the oceans by fighter bombers. They were in submarines. They were shot down out of the skies by anti-aircraft guns, and they were blown up on the battlefields of Europe and in the Pacific. And so they're producing a bunch of stuff that got destroyed. So that didn't help our economy any. The people did have jobs, but how long would that last, where you're just printing money to give people a job to build something that nobody ever gets to use, that gets destroyed? I mean, you're just destroying wealth, and you're destroying more wealth by creating money out of thin air to pay people to do that. This is the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. Thank God Robert Higgs did the economic research and proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is wrong. But people like Hannity and Limbaugh, they don't even read it, and the people on the left are even worse. So that's kind of the consensus on economics, is that is what brought us out of World War II. Well, it really wasn't. We were deep into socialism by then. We had to peel back several layers in order to get our economy working well enough to win the war, and that was really the economists of the day that were working in government said, what are we going to do? The war is over. We have all these people coming back, and there are no jobs for them. And you know what? Within a few months, it was less than a year, I think it was 6 months, the economy was taking off like a rocket ship to the moon. And there were things being produced everywhere. We had one of the greatest booms of I think our economy grew more in the following year, and I think it was something like 27% or something like this. I guess I didn't have time to do as much research as I would have liked to have done. I believe you can, there's a Tom Woods speech on this about World War II, myths about World War II or something, or great economic myths, and one of them talks about World War II, and he has the percent down. It's 23 or 27%. It's the greatest growth our economy has ever known in history. And this was a time when all these economists were wringing their hands, thinking that we were going to plunge into even deeper recession. And finally, we had all this pent-up demand because nobody had been able to buy anything for all this time. They had actually saved money. There was a pool of savings, and this pool of savings led to great consumer demand, which really, that was, and get this right now, the pool of savings, people had, because of government, and the government didn't do this in a beneficial way, they were doing this for the war effort, because they had restricted the supply of consumer goods to consumers and had rationed a lot of products. There wasn't enough things to buy for the money that you had, so that people saved their money instead. And when the war was over and suddenly all those restrictions were lifted, there was so much demand for consumer products that it just lifted, it gave jobs to lots of people. They were building houses right and left. Huge growth of our economy. Well, that's how you really get an economy rolling, is you increase the pool of savings. That's real money. That's not money that was created out of thin air. That was money that was created by doing something. Now, not everybody was working in a wartime factory. There were people that were farmers and people that were making other things. Some of them went to the war, and some of them were to go to people so they could live, you know. And so there was still work being done, and those savings, that pool of savings, was mostly real money. It was the result of real things that had been produced. Okay, now I'm getting away from my subject tonight, but even though we started our socialist economic system in about 1930s, we had a brief reprieve for about, I'd say, 5 or 10 years until the socialism started to advance again upon us. And by 1964, we had a war on poverty, and we were deep into it again. So we haven't always had socialism in this country, but the sports show guy was right about one thing. They were still socialistic or public works projects, such as basically a socialist concept, that existed in the 19th century as well. So we've had some socialist type of concept going for, probably almost 200 years of the creation of the country. Now, the first efforts, we'll go a little history on this, the first efforts to use public works to increase transportation were generally on canals. These people had these ideas that, well, we had this huge deposit of coal here, and it's much bigger than the previous deposits of coals that we had, but we had already built this iron ore plant over here, and now we have this new deposit. We don't really want to go to the expense of building another competing iron ore plant, because we really don't need that much iron at this time. Railroads were just kind of barely getting started at that time. What we really need is, and it'd be much less expensive, we could use waterways to move goods from point A to point B, and we could move that coal from that new source to this iron ore plant, and it would be much more economical to do it through a canal. But they said, how are we gonna buy a canal? How are we gonna build a canal? Well, actually, there were some of the canals that were built privately. Actually, people say, I think that this is going to be such an economic thing. We'll be able to get our coal at a much cheaper price. It's a lot cheaper than bringing it here by the wagon load. And we won't be using that canal 24/7, 365. We'll also be able to charge people to ship other things on the canal. And so there were some private entities that went out and bought the right-of-ways, did the engineering, constructed the canals, and operated them profitably. And there were also people who didn't want to do it that way, and they passed bond measures, and they suckered the taxpayers into signing on to debt that was used to construct these competing canals. And those canals were generally way over budget, poorly managed. One such canal was in Indiana, I believe, and I believe it's the one that ended at Evansville. And Tom DiLorenzo talks about it in one of his books. It's either How Capitalism Saved America or Hamilton's Curse. It's one of those books. He talks about how the debt incurred by the state of Indiana to build this canal it set them back economically. It made them economically uncompetitive for several generations. So it was a debt that was foisted forward to generations that weren't even born, and deprived them of the same standard of living that people in neighboring states were experiencing. So the people in Illinois and in Ohio were having much better lives than people in Indiana were having miserable lives because their canal, they were still paying for a canal. By the time they finished paying for it, the canal had been abandoned, was no longer being used. So that was one of the socialist roads. Now the private ones, those private roads, when they were done, a lot of them they kept sections of them to use for whatever. Some of them are used for recreational purposes today. They were donated to cities. They use them as a centerpiece for parks. The private people, seeing that they had some value, tried to recover and reclaim as much as they could of what was left so they could use that money for investment in other places. And they knew that there were other uses for these things, and so they tried to make use of them in those ways. I mean, they might be a pond that's stocked with fish for people to go out and catch fish in the spring or summer, the place to do boating and build a park around a section of it. Who knows how exactly what they did with it. I wasn't there, and not all these were probably private enterprise things. Some of them were the socialist canals that were built. But the point that I was trying to make is that the privately run canals made money. They actually reduced the cost of bringing coal to the iron ore smelting plants, and thus made that product cheaper for everybody. And everybody benefited from this, and nobody had to pay for it except the people that did the canal. Whereas the socialist canal, everybody had to pay for it, and nobody except the very rich elite ever got any benefit from it. And then eventually when it was abandoned, it still had to be paid for. And there wasn't anybody there to find these other great uses for this. So that's one of those great socialist roads that was built. And you're saying, hey, that's a canal, it's not a road. Well, technically it was. It's a way of moving from point A to point B. It's a road. Before there were what we call roads today, there were trails, and those trails were like the Cumberland Trail was like a wagon road, and that was a pay road. And the man that owned that road, the family that owned it, had gone out and purchased the right-of-way all along that road so they could go from point A to point B, and they owned all that property, and they charged people to ride on that road, and they kept it up. It was a private road, and that was an 18th century road. Now it got kind of muddy in the winter. It wasn't they didn't have paving and concrete in those days, but they did have bridges across rivers. They had areas where it would get muddy. They would go and they would try and put down straw or sand or something to firm it up enough that the wagons wouldn't get stuck. It was state of the art for the time that it was built. There was also railroads. The railroads were roads. And one of the biggest boondoggles, which is historians refer to it as a masterpiece of engineering, was the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, the Transcontinental Railroad was such a big scandal. It caused such a big scandal as the Mobiler. Well, you can look it up under Mobiler scandal. This is basically how it worked. The companies that were building the railroad, they formed a secondary company which bought all the material that they were to use and then sold it to them at a modest profit, or what was supposed to be a modest profit. But what they really did was they bought stuff up. They then phonied up the invoices to make it look like they had paid much, much more for it, turned in bills to the United States government to get compensated for this material, and then sold it to the companies that were actually putting the track down for an even a second profit. this was just unbelievable, the amount of money they were making in this scandal. And they were making so much money, they knew they were going to get caught, so they went out and they started to buy congressmen. They bought them by giving them stock in their company. So these congressmen started making money hand over fist. Well, nobody's going to call for an investigation on a railroad that's giving you more money than you've ever seen in your life. And so the Transcontinental Railroad cost maybe 10 to 100 times more than it should have. It was so poorly done because of the way the contracts were awarded that most of it had to be replaced within 2 or 3 years. They had laid track on frozen ground. When it thawed out, it sunk into the mud. They got paid by the mile instead of by just whatever. So they would often do these winding corners around here instead of going in a straight line from point A to point B. They try to get as many miles in per actual mile east to west as they could. So they go north and they go south, and they go north and they go south, and they go each time just barely inching along westwardly or eastwardly, depending on which direction they're headed to. And you contrast that to a private railroad that was being built at the same time. That was the Great Minnesota Northern, and that was a totally privately run railroad. We've talked about it on our show before. The man who constructed that railroad, he went and he bought the right-of-ways, just like the private canal people did. He bought the right-of-way for every single mile of track, and because he wanted this thing to last for a long time, he didn't want to go back and have to lay track again because that had to come out of his pocket. He made sure they did everything right. He made sure he went in as straight as line as possible. He made it efficient and economical to run, and this railroad made money year after year after year, where the Transcontinental Railroad never made a dime. It was in such bad financial shape that the United States government had to step in and take over the retirement pensions of the railroad workers, and that's an institution that stays to this day. Railroad worker pensions are a federal pension program. I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's because of the corruption and the graft corruption and mismanagement of the original Transcontinental Railroad. So that's another socialist road that was just a total failure. Now, I have to stop here, and I have to admit that the sports guy was right to a certain extent. Many of the roads that we drive on today are built from a socialist economic system. But in the same breath, as I say that, I want to say that same socialist economic system has to take responsibility for the poor condition of these roads. They're run down, they have potholes, they aren't taken care of in a timely manner so that the potholes actually erode the road surface, causing the temporary repairs they come on to patch them up later to not last very long at all, and the roads get worse and worse and worse. We have bridges across rivers that are falling into the rivers. It's happened up in Minnesota, and it happened down in one of the southern states about 20 or 30 years ago. I think it was in Louisiana, where the bridge just collapsed and it sent cars into the river when it did it both times. We have I think you can look this number up, but there's well over 10,000 bridges on American highways that need to be replaced. I mean, concrete doesn't last forever, unlike you may have been led to believe. It reaches its peak strength in about 30 to 50 years, and then it starts getting weaker. And you got to start replacing it at some point in time. You can't just depend on it to be there forever. And plus it gets cracks, and the rebar that's in there, the steel that holds it together and gives it its tensile strength, it starts to rust because those cracks. And eventually they fall apart. You have to replace them. So they're not doing a very good job of the upkeep. If these were private roads, I think they've been built with better materials, better design. They'd realized that the upkeep was really important to protecting their investment, and they'd stay in better shape because they spend less money in the long run that way. But when it's politics to decide how the money is spent, the roads, the money that's set aside for roads gets kind of robbed all the time by other political uses for the money, depending on who's in office. And it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or Democrat; they all have their favorite causes, and so the roads is something that's fairly easy to steal from because we'll get it next year. Well, it's sometimes that isn't a good decision, and so. For the broadcaster there that had these ideas about roads, I want you to know that before you go out there and start throwing out something that on the surface may have a little bit of truth to it, but is so patently false that it's laughable. Like I said, I almost had an accident. If I'd have been driving on a freeway or something, it would have been really serious accident potential there, because this was so absurd what he said, and I just, there's all these ideas were popping in my head about this, about that, and there was at no level was this even close to correct, or the exact history of what had happened in our nation, and that little tiny bit that was true. If you look at it a little closer, you see that since socialism has taken over our roads, they've deteriorated. So. I'm going to kind of end up this part of the show and go on to my next segment, but I just want you to know, Mr. Fox Sports broadcaster man, that you should probably stick to football and baseball and NASCAR and the things you know something about, or interview people who do, but stay out of the political realm unless you know what you're talking about, because you just made a fool of yourself. And the people at Fox Sports News, I mean, how did you ever let this guy get away with this? Because you guys end up looking like clowns, too, by association. So that's all I had on that. Now, and I guess I should add a couple things here. It's always real important when you look at an economic decision, and certainly building a road is an economic decision. You don't want to look at, was this a good idea? Did it help this? Did it help the people that intended to help? But you want to look at, did it hurt anybody? Did it cause unintended consequences? And certainly, if you look at like that canal in Indiana that put their state back about 3 generations for it to catch up with the neighboring states, and they were basically the same people living in the same country, working the same farmland with the same weather, yet they were much, much poorer because of this tax burden from that canal. And so you look at economic decisions, and you find that the people who are operating in the free market they have to own their decision because they own the property that they're building. They tend to make better decisions. I'm not saying they're perfect, because they're going to make mistakes too, but they tend to cut their losses. They tend to make better decisions on how to use their money, because capital is a scarce resource. It has alternate uses, and you can't beat a dead horse and get anything out of it. And they realize all those things are true. The people that use a public works project to build a road, and that's a socialist concept, those people don't have an economic grim reaper, I guess is a good thing to call it. They don't have any way to measure their success or their failure other than, did we reach our objective? They cannot see the failure and the ruin that their project may have brought in the lives of other people who were not involved in that objective they were trying to reach. And so that economic rule of the unintended consequences, it doesn't mean anything at all to them. They figure, well, it's not my trouble. They voted for it. It's their responsibility too. Well, yeah, they did, but not, if in an election where you win 51% to 49%, this 49% of the people got screwed and they didn't vote for it. And there's a lot of victims in these kinds of projects, and it isn't just relegated to roads. It's sports stadiums, it's convention centers. Here in Medford, I just passed Actually, the bond issue was voted down to build a new police station. So they, instead of not building it or putting it on the table, they instead added a fee to everybody's water bill to raise the money to build this new police station. And they just get the steel up in the air, and they realize that this is going to be about 50% over budget. So everything they told us about is only going to be for a short time, and then it'll be out for your water bill. Well, it's going to be on there for a long time, longer now, much longer. And unintended consequences. The voters knew. They even voted it down. You can't blame this one on the people that voted for it, because it went down in flames. It was like 3-1 it went down. But the city council, they voted for it 9-0, and they rationalized this, that it was they were voted in by the people, so the people were voting for this on their water bill because they were elected to this thing. And I think they should have held a recall elections for all nine city councilmen, and they still should hold it for all 9 city council. Although I think one of them has passed away since then, so they only have to do it for 8. But the person that took her seat, probably they should be recalled as well. And they should put people in there that really are going to be responsible for their decisions. I know the people that serve on the city council, they don't really get paid. It's kind of a public service. Yeah. But they just spend about, I'd say close to $50 million of other people's money. It was supposed to be 30, but now it's 50. And this is not right. I actually think it's supposed to be 33, and it turned out to be 50. So that's 50% more. And this is just not right. These people should face an economic consequence for their actions. And if it means that they're discredited, they are recalled from their elected positions, they have a black mark on their, they might be using this as a stepping stone to become a state representative for the state of Oregon or something. So I also want to say that all this stuff about using other people's money, you better be careful how you get involved with that, because history's shown it doesn't work very well. Do you know that the Meadowlands, which used to be where the New York Giants played their football games, was actually in New Jersey. The Meadowlands was built on a bond issue. And the Meadowlands was built and torn down. It's no longer there. It's been gone. But the taxes to pay for that stadium and the tearing down of it are still being levied on the people in New Jersey. And there's no stadium for them to enjoy anymore. It's gone. But they're still paying for it, and they still will for another generation or two. I think it was like a 50 or 80, I don't know how many year bond it is, but the stadium lasted a lot less than the bond issue did. And that's more typical of how these public works projects end up than anything I can think of. So, on to my final topic, my last topic, my second topic, all the same thing. Let's see. A while back, we had a young lady on our show to talk about the tragic death of Kelly Thomas in California. He was beat to death by police officers. Her name was, at that time, she was going by Cassandra Rules. Her real name is Cassandra Fairbanks, I guess. Facebook made her change her name because that was the name she registered her account under, and you can't have an AKA in Facebook. And I thought that I didn't really care what her politics were. I thought that she was championing a good and noble cause, and so I had her on our show. We had Drew and Colby were in on that show as well, and we talked about that unfortunate case and the fact that the 2 police officers who beat Kelly Thomas to death actually got off with, they weren't charged, they were charged with crimes, but they beat the charges in court and they were set free. And we thought, this is a terrible injustice. This just shows how you can't trust the state with power, that it attracts people that abuse that power. And we also had on that show the great Tony Bones from the Bones of Anarchy. She had an awesome story to tell about her struggles with the city that fined her for growing vegetables in an old tire in her front yard. They said it didn't look good enough. And they fined her. She wouldn't pay the fine, so they made her work it off. which made it harder for her to earn money to feed her family. And it just, that's how the state is. They don't really care. They don't have your interest at heart. They have someone else's interest at heart. And that's another perfect example of why we just don't need government in our lives so much. Well, fast forward, Toni Bones is moving on, not intellectually and not activist-wise, but she's moved out of the supervision of the restrictive city that was making her life a living hell, and she moved out more in a country setting where things are a little more free. She's a little less governed by the city governments and has fewer rules and regulations to go by. She's kind of having a better life these days. I think she still has the normal troubles that all of us have. It's not every day is not like a Ned Flanders out there, but she's having some fun in her life, and she's enjoying her family and her kids and stuff, and that's great. Our other guest, Cassandra Fairbanks, has gone to the dark side, and she's now a fan of Bernie Sanders. And as I said, this is kind of use this as tearing into the Bernie Sanders theme in this show. I like part of what Bernie Sanders stands for. He's, so one thing that I thought was, maybe I could live with him as a candidate is because of his stand on the war. He really doesn't want us in these wars, but he has softened that stand since I started to admire him a little bit, and now he's kind of backtracking because he realizes he actually has a chance to win. He's no longer using running for president as a way to advance these issues to the public and to start some meaningful discussion on whether we should be in these wars or not. He thinks, I've got a chance to win. I can't alienate all the people that are warmongers in this country. And so I've lost a lot of respect for him because of that. But Cassandra thinks that he is just the bee's knees, and she continues to support him. And I had no problem with that. I mean, everybody's going to have their own political candidate, and they it's not my right to tell them how they should think. And certainly I don't want other people telling me how I should think. But she continues to be kind of an activist in the sense that issues that she thinks are where injustice is being done, she wants to bring them to the forefront. Well, one of those issues had to deal with a man in Oklahoma who was going to be executed probably that day. And she wanted to know how come there weren't more people that were out there protesting that. And she said, where are all the right-to-lifers when this is an innocent man that's being executed? Well, he may have been an innocent man. I didn't have time. I was at work. I didn't have time to, and I was in great pain also. I want to use this pain thing as much as I can as an excuse. But I really didn't have time anyway. I had a lot of work to do. But I did want to know whether he was guilty or not. I wasn't in favor of him being executed, and his innocence or guilt shouldn't have any bearing on whether you're wanting to protect a life. And that she had gone so far as to say all these people that are right to life but want the death penalty, she called them effing morons. And I didn't really appreciate that, because I'm a pretty staunch right to life person. I believe that life begins at conception. I always have. I always will. I have a lot of experience in the sciences, which shows. I mean, this wasn't a human life, but I watched. We inseminated eggs from an anemone when I was in biology in high school. And we were watching this under a microscope, and you see the fertilized egg, and suddenly it divides. And I didn't get to see the first one time it happened in the class. I didn't get to see it. I missed out, but it happened enough times. I think I got to see it divide from 4 to 8, and that was just a magical moment for me. I'll always remember it. It was like a point in time where just things froze for me. And I realized that this is a living cell, even though it's probably, I have to use a microscope to see it, it's still alive. It's changing. It's consuming energy from its host. It's growing. It's developing, and you can see that certain parts of it over time, it just grew into another urchin. And that was just an amazing experience. And then we got to see a movie that had been put out by Time Life. I don't know if this movie's available for schools anymore. I don't think the government wants us seeing this. And it was just showed kind of a fast-forward development of a baby in the womb. And it was a bunch of still pictures have been taken with special photography techniques. I think they used something like a fiber optic cable to take pictures in the womb of the baby, and these were color pictures. And that was incredible. They would do the pictures just one after another. You could just see the baby start out as just cells, and then started to have features, and suddenly you see a heart beating, and this was, the heart's beating is less than, it's in the first trimester. And whoa. And I just thought that was amazing. This is a living person. And I got to thinking, man, this Cassandra Fairbanks said, you've had a baby, you have a child, and you don't respect that life that has a beating heart, and you think it's okay to murder that innocent life that hasn't done anything to anybody. It wasn't even conceived of its intent. It was two other people got together and did it, and it's being taken. Its life is being taken from it before it has a chance to even draw a breath. And you know, this is wrong, and I don't think it's right to execute people for murders. I mean, a lot of the people on death row were convicted on faulty evidence. The FBI has fessed up to that, and even if it was right evidence, I think it's probably a big enough punishment to just keep them locked up until they die of natural causes. And I think as a society, we need to respect life more. And if we did have more respect for life, we wouldn't have all this carnage in our streets we have today. And I really think that if you look forward to the future and the kind of world you want to live in, do you want to live in a world where there's respect for life, or don't you? That's kind of where it has to come down to. It doesn't have to do anything with your religious experience. That can give you moral guidance, but you really have to make up this decision on your own. You have to think it out logically. If you can't respect, we've killed, since the Roe versus Wade decision, we've killed over 50 million babies prior to coming to term. And some people would say, well, it's the mother's choice. Okay. Well, I'm pro-life. That's why I'm against war. That's why I'm against the death penalty. That's why I'm against abortion. And I don't think that's a fucking moronic stance. So, Cassandra, I was greatly offended by your remarks, but rather than return them in kind fashion, I wrote you a private message. Actually, I wrote you a post on it saying that I'm somebody that is anti-abortion, and I also anti-death penalty, and I see that because I have respect for life. And I also mentioned to her that calling people names doesn't add to the weight of your argument. It just shows that you have no logic or reason behind your statements, and which was pretty obvious because she just called me an idiot retard. And then I sent her a private message because she had unfriended me, so I could no longer post messages on that. What do you call? Well, I couldn't post messages to that conversation. So I just sent her a message saying I would no longer, thank you for saving me the trouble of unfriending you, but I just think that you ought to find some logic and reason behind what you're saying, and not resort to calling people names and trying to belittle people to win your arguments. And this is the same person that started the fat dancing man dancing man thing, because she thought the people were picking on him, and she thought that wasn't right. Well, apparently she just thought it was a cause she could exploit to get her name in the paper, because she doesn't really believe in looking out for the rights of unborn babies. Certainly they're being picked on. I guess 50 million dead babies is just a statistic, whereas one fat man that gets mocked in a Facebook post, that's really something that's really bad. I don't know. I just think killing people is a lot worse than making fun of somebody, but maybe that's just me. So, Cassandra, I'm kind of calling you out. I've tried to point out some inconsistencies in the things that you say and the causes you support, and I'm not calling you a name at all. I just think that you need to look a little closer, and hopefully you'll come back to that courageous woman that was willing to stand up and protest the death of Kelly Thomas, because I thought you had all the facts on your side in that time, and you didn't need to call people names and everything else to get attention of other people. And you need to return to that person and throw away this person you've become, because that's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to lead you to a dead end. And I, for one, would really like to see that other person come back and emerge again sometime in the future. And it doesn't matter whether you back Bernie Sanders or not. What matters is you become a person that respects other people, because if you don't, you'll never get any respect from anybody. So that's the end of that. We're nearing the end of the show. Thank you all for listening today. Thank you, Jules, for the UCY Radio Network. You are a gem, and you don't know how much better I feel after having said that today. Again, it only happened 2 days ago, but it just really bothered me that someone that I guess I made a mistake, but somebody I had respected would behave in this manner. And it's nice to be able to get out there and to explain something and an open forum where people can listen. And it's right there. It's going to be on the internet forever. They'll help a lot of people listen to it, and a lot of you listen to it. Again and again, tell your friends. UCY Network is a treasure, and if we don't support it and promote it and help it grow, it's going to be a lost treasure. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you again all for listening, and we'll see you next week. And in the coming weeks, we're going to have some exciting guests on. I'm not going to give you the names because I think it jinxes me. Last time I did with Jeffrey Tucker, he had to cancel, and so he may be with us again soon. But I'm not going to say he is, because I don't want to jinx it. And we have some other people. We're going to be talking about some scientific issues, some things with the Rife microscope and the Royal Rife, his life, and so keep tuning in to UCY on Thursday nights, 7 to 8 p.m. Pacific, for some great shows. We have a lot more to go over before I run out of material, so we'll talk to you then. So I'm listening for music, and I don't think our song is in the